Welcome you back to Swami Reacts. Today, I'll be sharing some reflections on Richard Rohr's book, The Wisdom Pattern. As you may know, a few weeks ago, at least from the time of recording this episode, I had the fortune of visiting Father Richard Rohr for a third time, this time in his hermitage, in the intimacy and informality of his hermitage. He received me with his bathrobes. I was with my monastic robes, so each one was in our own respective set of robes, sharing very intimately. We did a podcast together, as you may have seen already. And on the eternal becoming of God, soul, and matter, he has very kindly endorsed my recent book, Evolution and Divine Love. So anyhow, we have been talking about so many things. And also I felt before visiting him, I want to enter into the mood and go through some of his books that I've not read yet. I've read a few of them, good number of them, at least 10 or something. But it's difficult to keep the pace with an author like Richard Rohr because he has published almost 30 books or more. And something that really touches me and inspires me about someone like Richard is like every line that he writes is meaningful. It's not that you find one, I don't know, profound one-liner after every page or so. Every line, every word, every sentence, every paragraph has some purpose, has some context, has realization. You can feel, here I'm reading someone with wisdom. Here I'm reading an elder. Here I'm reading an intelligent person, compassionate, sensitive. In my opinion, I cannot avoid in many ways relating my experience of reading Father Richard Rohr with my experience of reading personalities like Srila Bhakti Rakshak Goswami Maharaj. And I'm not wanting here to compare one with the other in every sense. Each person is their own unique constellation. But the experience is very similar in terms of each line can throw you into a lectio divina for 3 days. You can stay with one line and contemplate that and ruminate on that and reflect on that. So I like to take notes when I read books. So I'm seeing the notes at this moment that I've taken, and it's difficult because at one point you feel tempted to basically highlight the whole book. So I'm really fortunate to be able to not only know someone like Richard Rohr and read his books, but have a personal relationship of a friendship, him being a mentor for me, an elder. And I like to share some words today regarding this particular book, the wisdom pattern, and as you can see below, order, disorder, reorder. So that's the wisdom pattern. That's one of the main teachings of Richard in his life. There is some wisdom pattern that we can see in an archetypal way replicated and talked in different traditions with different words. He puts them in these three particular terms: order, disorder, reorder. We are in a certain comfort zone. Everything is working, seems to be working according to what we need. Everything is going nice. And at one point, there's some disruption, some holy disorder that throws us out of the comfort zone to the liminal space, to the teaching arena, to the learning zone. So we can learn some lessons, and after learning those lessons, we can obtain reorder, a new order, not the previous order, but a new one, more wide, more broad, more deep, more accommodating. And of course, eventually that reorder becomes a new form of status quo, of order. We need a new level of disorder to disrupt complacency and conformism, and invites us to a new level of integration, and so on and so forth. And that's how progress takes place. So I feel in this book, Richard is trying to normalize this pattern, because many times, especially in spiritual religious circles, we end up stigmatizing what should be normalized, especially patterns like this. So many times us practitioners feel some sort of order and become addicted to order and think that only order, status quo, conformism is the symptom that God is happy with us, that we are being blessed, that we are being advanced. And that's not true. And or sometimes when disorder breaks in, we feel I must be doing something wrong, and we are thrown into a guilt, shame, toxic trip. And that's not good either. All those things need to happen in their own way. And many times the most thing we are most afraid, as Richard will also put it, is reorder. Can I trust the new order, or I'm too attached to whatever nostalgic idea of how things were in the past, and I'm not allowing a new order? But again, as I like to talk, especially in my recent book, Evolution in Divine Love, reality is always evolving, reality is always growing, reality is always becoming something more, invoking a new order, a new order. Love is always creating new, more and more accommodating things. So if we want to practice spirituality, it means to follow the lead of love, which is always invoking a new order, and for that, a new disruption to the previous order. So we need to learn this wisdom pattern by heart, basically, of order, disorder, reorder. In the beginning of the book, Richard is mentioning how different traditions will use different words or cycles to refer to this pattern. Whether we scientists speaking of stars, supernova explosion, vast amounts of light and energy, or journey, fall, return to a new home, birth, sin, rebirth, love, failure, forgiveness, okay, catastrophe, hope, law, prophets, and wisdom regarding the Hebrew scriptures. Anyhow, he gives days, night, sunrise. Over and over again, you will find that across traditions, across cultures, like again, a blueprint of reality, how life operates. So it makes no sense to go against that, because that's how reality operates, right? So we don't want to basically live an impossible life trying to establish a new set of laws when the cosmic arrangement is already in place everywhere, very clearly. So for me, it's a very book that invites for deep acceptance of this particular cycle. And of course, the whole book is an elaboration of which are the implications. What's order? Which are the very forms of order that we can conceive? Which are the very forms of disorder that may come and knock on our door? And what does reorder look like? Well, how that could look like in our different situations. Also, I appreciate the introduction to the book when Richard Rohr is speaking about the postmodern opportunity. And he's given a very brief but brilliant social analysis in terms of starting with his own founding father, so to say, St. Francis of Assisi, and how he lived in an enchanted world, as we know, St. Francis in particular, speaking with all the species in harmony and peace, with all creations having deep relationality and connection. And now we find ourselves in a place where lack of meaning, lack of inherent purpose is the norm. So what happened in between? So he goes gradually from these medieval times to a time where what that's called generally known as modernism, where we really bogged into this idea of progress, that it's all about growing and progress, and in a linear way we are going better and better. And especially after the Enlightenment, rationality, science is solving everything, is giving all our answers. Future is brilliant, and it's all depending on our heads, basically, in one sense. So the more rational you are, the more answers you will have, the more sophisticated technological you become. Future is bright. But of course, then happens what? Something like the Holocaust, which was basically coming from Germany, which at the time was arguably the most rationally refined country in the world. Follow my point? So we are coming with this naive optimism of modernism in terms of rationality is the all in all, it will take us to success. And then the most rational country in the world is creating the Holocaust. So that really, from order to disorder, that's very clear. So then it's like, okay, if this went wrong, then maybe nothing is right. Then comes this susceptibility or even cynicism that characterizes the postmodern era, which at the end of the day, of course, is a sharp criticism to modernism's naive optimism, but also sometimes it can go too far to the point of nothing is true. There's no reality, there's no inherent purpose, with its concomitant byproduct of that we can see nowadays, the rise in anxiety and suicide and existential crisis because of a lack of inherent meaning and purpose. So it's important to even understand historically, okay, we are finding ourselves in a particular period in history, a particular time characterized by this and that. But why? This is a byproduct, a reaction probably to something that happened before and what happened before, and so on and so forth. And again, to see beyond all that, to see how, which are the universal patterns that always remain there, inviting us to accept reality for what it is. So Father Richard also refers to that in one of the chapters of the book. Again, some of the titles of the book are, the subtitles of the chapters are The Postmodern Opportunity, Beyond Victimhood, Great Awakening, What is Your Window of Reality, The Great Chain of Being, The Power of Forgiveness. And this one is the cosmic egg of meaning. So he has this particular illustration, as much as I can show it here. So another classical teaching from Richard, which is, on one level, we have my story, which is about me, basically. The reality revolves around me, what I want, what I need, how to have it, etc., etc. No? Power, prestige, possessions, my story. Then a bigger layer of this cosmic egg is our story. I am not an alienated entity. No man is an island. I exist in relationships. So group identities, not only my identity, group identities. It's a little bit more expanded. I belong to this country, to this race, to this whatever social area, to this religious group, and so on and so forth. So my loyalties to a bigger picture of reality expand my sense of self, from my story to our story. But then on top of that, he will bring the final layer of this cosmic egg, which is the story. What actually is ultimate reality, as it is, in the words of Srila Prabhupada, how reality looks like, the great patterns that are always true, right? These underlying currents that always are true eternally, like what we are talking now: order, disorder, reorder. This wisdom pattern is part of the story. It's not canceling our story and my story, it's putting them in context. So it's very important to attend each one of these layers of reality. Not only what do I need, but to see myself as part of a larger whole, and to see that larger whole as part of an even larger whole, which encompasses ultimately everything. So in that, the story, in that ultimate layer of reality, which are those things that are always true. So this wisdom pattern tries to take us there. Order, reorder, disorder, reorder. I like to conclude sharing one section from the book, since I haven't shared a single quote so far. There are so many notes, again, as I told you, that I've taken here. Many things. Let me just pick a few randomly. For example, in this chapter, The Power of Forgiveness, Richard says, it's a subsection called What is Behind Hate. Especially for these times we're living today, it's so much hate, so much polarization. He says, hate can be helpful to certain causes. It unites a group quickly. It gives a person identity, even if it's a negative one. And most of all, it takes away doubt and all free-floating anxiety. It gives some sense of security. I hate that person. It gives an identity. It gives us a place to stand that feels superior and in control. Hate settles the dust and ambiguity that none of us like. Hate is much more common and more immediately effective than love. In the short run, don't get him wrong, please. Hate, as we will sadly see below, makes the world go round. So again, I love how he begins the section by speaking about the quote-unquote glories of hate. Of course, he's not praising hate here, but he's analyzing in a very fine way why we resort to hate in many ways, in many times. We resort to creating an us and ambition and enemies. What that provides, again, at least apparently in the short term, a sense of identity, sense of belonging, clarity, no anxiety, but at the end of the day, ends up being a big, huge trouble, right? Let me conclude with one more section, which comes from a chapter which personally is my favorite one, although difficult to pick a favorite one. All are my favorite, but this one is called Limits Are Good Teachers. And again, Richard is very balanced, in my opinion. He's not going to the extreme. We don't need limits. We don't need rules. We don't need boundaries. We have to be free. No, he's not saying that, but he's also not going to the extreme right nor to the extreme left. I'm trying to always hold everything in place, being paradoxical, being nuanced, integrating the apparent opposites, reconciling all the aspects of reality. So here we are on the chapter called Limits Are Good Teachers, on a subsection called The True Self Has Never Been Hurt. So Richard says, I don't think it's an oversimplification to say that people basically live either in an overall attitude of gratitude or an overall attitude of resentment. Stay with that for a moment. The mystical minimum that he has been referring before in this section, somehow relate to gratitude. The mystical minimum is gratitude. Everything that is given, that we are breathing today, is pure gift. The air you're breathing is pure gift. You didn't do anything to deserve that air, the sun rays, and so on. None of us have earned it. None of us have a right to it. All we can do is kneel and kiss the ground. Somewhere, anywhere, everywhere. So, a few thoughts on Richard Rohr's The Wisdom Pattern, which is a book published many years ago, but I've just read it this time, and it's becoming one of my favorites. Each one of his books is my favorite. So, order, disorder, reorder. Let's continue the conversation. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think about these ideas? How this pattern of order, disorder, and reorder has expressed in your life? Which are the lessons that you can draw? How much clarity having a pattern like this can shed on your daily dynamics of life? How can we understand what's going on in our day-to-day through this type of frameworks, through this type of phrasing, through this type of perimeter that helps us to understand from a bigger picture what and why is knocking on our door? So let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for your presence, and see you in our next session of Swami Reacts.